Welcome everyone to today's webinar from Where's the Bill to Budget the Benefit. My name's Michelle Hewitt and I'm the Chair of Disability Without Poverty, and I'll be the host for today's event alongside Rabia Khedr, the National Director of Disability Without Poverty. Before we begin the webinar, I'm going to go over our accessibility components and the agenda for today. Please note that throughout the event, we will have the chat closed to the public as it can be disruptive to other participants. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, you will be able to send a chat message to hosts and panelists. For all the questions that you have, please put them in the Q&A box, which is usually at the bottom of your screen. We'd greatly encourage you to share your questions, as we'll be responding to as many as we can live during our conversation. Our meeting today features simultaneous English and French translation, LSQ and ASL interpretation, English and French captioning. Please take a moment to adjust your settings as appropriate. First, select your preferred language, English or French. You do this by selecting the interpretation option on your Zoom menu. Once you select this option, you will not need to change language settings again during the presentation. You must select a language even if you want to hear this presentation in English. If you are using a mobile device, such as a phone or a tablet, you can find the language interpretation options under More. For those who require ASL or LSQ interpretation, we will be spotlighting those components throughout the presentation. No need to do anything. These will automatically remain on your screen. To enable captions, select the Captions option on your Zoom menu. If you would like to adjust the size and placement of these captions, you need to go into your Zoom accessibility settings. For those of you who would like to access French captions for the event today, please click on the link that has been put in the webinar chat box to access these online. If we can support you through this presentation, please send us a message in the chat box and someone will assist you. For any additional settings, please go to your personal Zoom account settings or your in-webinar audio settings for more customization. So, to summarize our accessibility options, please select your language using the interpretation option. Enable captions if required. And finally, make sure to share your questions in the Q&A box. Our team members are on hand to help you with any technical difficulties you may be experiencing. And I'd just like to take this moment to thank everybody from Plan Institute, who is here once again to help us present this, and all of the members of the interpretation, whether it is in ASL or LSQ. We couldn't do this without you. So let's move on. First of all, our land acknowledgements. I'm coming to you from Kelowna, BC, which is on the unceded and ancestral lands of the Okanagan Syilx First Nation, whose land I am very grateful to live here as an uninvited settler. Rabia?
Good morning and good afternoon. Magwitch for joining us. My name is Rabia Khedr, the National Director of Disability Without Poverty, and I am speaking to you from the traditional territories, most recently of the Mississaugas of the New Credit in Mississauga, Ontario. And I would like to recognize the original inhabitants of this turtle island from sea to sea to sea, who have preserved and protected this land, the ancestors of our First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples who have entrusted this land to generations to come. And as settlers and occupiers, we enjoy its benefits and we commit to truth and reconciliation.
Thank you, Rabia. So I can see the number of participants is already at over 250, and I think that reflects the interest that people have in trying to understand what's happening at the moment. So, Rabia, let's try and talk through, you and I, the things that have happened since then, and generate questions from people and do our best to answer them as we possibly can. So, Royal Ascent happened. You want to explain what that was?
Sure. Well, we were in this mode. We called this from where's the benefit to, where's the bill to budget the benefit, and now I'm getting a little tongue tied because now we're into strictly where's the benefit or budget the benefit for that matter. We have the law. C-22 was passed and achieved royal assent. It is now legally binding upon government, upon parliament to form regulations and deliver on this promise, actually provide a Canada Disability Benefit. So royal assent happened June the 22nd, and then we moved right along, waiting and waiting and waiting in anticipation, expecting that Minister Carla Qualtrough would announce the regulations process and would lead us through it as the champion that she had been for the Canada Disability Benefit after the promise was made in 2020 by the Prime Minister. A promise that was, the result of many, many decades of work by advocates in different parts of this country, bringing forward programs and supports to deal with disability poverty, and a conversation that was rooted in a lot of grassroots work on the West Coast and in many pockets, fragmented in different spaces, spotlighting the reality of people with disabilities. So we were expecting Minister Qualtrough to launch the process to form regulations. In July, just a couple of days before the cabinet shuffle, came a news release announcing the process. It wasn't very detailed. Everybody was left wondering, oh, what next? What next? And it came, basically on the eve of a cabinet shuffle, something that we were not planning for. And as Disability Without Poverty always says, we've been building the plane and flying it. We thought we had built it a little bit, but we needed to now repair the next flight schedule because we have a new minister. Michelle.
Yeah, so let's take all of that apart a little bit. So going, as you said, we got royal assent, and that was quite a tense moment, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we were really concerned that if we didn't get royal assent before the summer, who knows, right? Time in politics is can change directions on things so quickly. So and there were concerns in the Senate and all kinds of things, but it passed. We have a piece of legislation. But one of the things that had been built on all along, that I kind of just want to talk about a little bit before we get into the details, is that it was going to be co-created, that this bill was something that was going to be built alongside disabled people, not something that was just going to be built by bureaucrats on their own. And I think it's worthwhile thinking about why co-creation is important. It's not something that's just sort of maybe good manners and polite or something that we should do. It's something that's crucial. And I know, Rabia, over the summer, in August, I shared a story with you that I read from the American news. In Kentucky, they came up with a new system for busing the kids to school. And on the first day, that system went so wrong that kids were still on the bus at 10 o'clock at night. Still, parents frantic, still hadn't found their way home. And why was that? Because when they had created that new system, they hadn't involved any of the bus drivers in it. So there were all kinds of issues that just didn't work because the people who created the system didn't have an understanding of how the system actually worked day to day. And I think that's a really good, sort of analogy of our system, that people who, you know, for the in the best intentions, like work on as policy analysts and so on, building these systems, don't understand them as much as the people who live them on a day-to-day basis. Want to say anything about that, Rabia, before we go through
Oh,
what the announcement? Yeah,
absolutely. Our lived experience is central as people with disabilities and people involved in our lives. We know what barriers we face, and each one of us faces unique barriers. When policymakers create programs and supports, they don't necessarily know all the possible hiccups, no matter how brilliant they are. And just like we say, no matter how brilliant artificial intelligence is, for example, it does not replace the human brain completely, right? So there are things that we have in our lived experience that need to be central to the design of any solution that is genuinely intended to support us.
yeah, yeah. I really agree. Strong words, Rabia. So, as you said, on July the 24th, an announcement came from Minister Qualtrough at that time that announced what this engagement, co-creation, whatever we want to call it, um, entails. And so I have the words in front of me. So the first part of it was August 2023, and it was an information session with disability stakeholders to establish a common understanding of the regulatory process. And I attended that, and I was just trying to remember, were there 30 other people, organizations, maybe a few more that were there. Um, I think it was a challenging meeting, to be fair. I think the people who attended it, we had a lot of questions that haven't yet been answered. And I think the main questions have to do with who gets to take part and to what depth do they get to take part. Because I think that it's really important that this was meant to be, the first legislation since the Accessible Canada Act that says that disabled people must be involved in policies and so on that are written for them. And I think it's really important that this looks like a new process that really does something different. And I guess it was kind of disappointing that it didn't look that different. The other part for me is that we just had, I'm sure many people here took part in one way or another the work for the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which is known as DIAP, DIAP. And I keep talking about page 32 of the final report. There's an excellent page that was written by our good friends at Inclusion Canada, where they talk about all the people that they found really difficult to get in touch with. They talk about, the most marginalized of the marginalized. So people experiencing houselessness, people who are institutionalized, racialized groups that haven't been connected with, indigenous populations, rural and remote populations. And I guess I had hoped that there would be more advance on how those people were going to be brought to the table. Rabia, your thoughts on that?
Well, again, Michelle and I are bringing our lived experience as disabled people. We assume that when we do these webinars, everybody knows that we have lived experience, but we're just highlighting the fact that, we bring our lived experience to these conversations. We've been advocating for lived experience to be central, co-creation to be central. The whole process of getting Bill C-22 to law, um, one of the sticking points that people really pressed to ensure was co-creation, and that was something clarified in the eventual legislation. So we bring that lived experience. We want to make sure that people whose voices aren't heard often are a part of that. And right now, to tell you the truth, Michelle, I'm not sure how that's going to be done within the proposed consultation process that was eventually clarified after the cabinet shuffle happened. Um, the folks in charge of consultations held a meeting, offered some further clarification as to how they were going to move forward in talking to the community about the regulations, about the details, to just clarify what regulations are, the details that will actually get the money to the people who need it most. So there's a whole bunch of details that need to be determined, and those details are going to be determined through a process where the government announced it will do an online consultation and hold some roundtables.
Yeah, I think as well, one of the things that, we have talked about, and the whole disability community has talked about, obviously, is the need to get money into people's pockets as soon as possible. And I think, one of the things that the meeting I was at laid out was that there's basically two separate years that could happen between now and that kind of happening. So the first year is called, it coming into force. And that's, and that started, the clock started ticking on that on June the 22nd, the day that we got royal assent. So we've already had June, July, August, September. We've already had 3 months of that. So there's only potentially 9 months. And they don't have to be that long, but that's the maximum it could be. And then the second part is another year, potentially a year or less, that is, as you said, the regulation process. And that's a process that is not something that's particularly flexible. It's set down in regulations of its own and legislation, I guess, of its own. We can get to that in a little while. But I think, I think it's fair for us to say right out that the maximum that this could take to complete that process is 2 years, and we don't want that, right? None of us want that. So I think it's equally, upon us all to keep that pressure on with our elected officials to say that, 2 years to end this process is just far too long, right? Who knows? Who knows where the world will be in 2 years? Who knows where, disabled people who have been waiting far too long will be in that time. So, so that's some of the sort of guardrails to this, if you like. Um, the
And
next
Michelle,
part, sorry, go ahead, Rabia.
if I can just jump in there, and that 2-year time frame also means that the agreement that the Liberals and NDP have in place also expires in 2025. So there is this possibility of an election. So we don't know who will be in charge at that time, and what philosophy they will have in terms of ending disability poverty in this country. So I
So I
don't
did
mean to
see
sound the alarm bells, but it's urgent that we get this work done.
So I did see one of the questions, Rabia, was that what happens if there's an election and a change in government? And I think that that was one of our concerns when it came to, getting the legislation done, because as far as my understanding of it is now we have that legislation and we have the at least a year for each of those two parts, so a maximum of 2 years that can't be changed by an incoming
Mhm.
government. So that's why that was so important. The part that is of a great concern is all of the details, right? How much, who gets it, and all of those sorts of things, right? So, and I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit further on. So the next part says there will be technical roundtables and bilateral meetings will be held to bring together the views of experts, stakeholders, and persons with disabilities on key areas under the regulations. Well, I would also say, Rabia, that persons with disabilities are experts and
Yep.
stakeholders. So I think there's some language there that needs to be altered in the announcement, because I don't know who could be more of an expert than the people that actually deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So that's as much as I know about that, Rabia. That there's going to be a number of meetings. I think I heard that they're going to be under a number of different topics. Um, you heard any
Yeah.
more?
No, I haven't heard any more. I remember for some reason four themes, and I hope it's more than four roundtables, but I'm
Yeah.
unsure.
Yeah. And then the third part to this first phase, if you like, is there will be an online survey and portal for open submissions to gather input from all Canadians. So I guess to the 279 people who are joining us today, please make sure that you submit to that survey and you send in an open submission, whatever it is that you need to do, because people need to hear what you think about this. I just want to give an example of something that happened recently that may give a little bit of faith to what's happening. So my research is about people in long-term care, and the government is doing some consultation on a new law for that called the Safe Long-Term Care Act. And it said seniors this and seniors that. And my research is all about younger disabled adults in long-term care. So I sent a written submission and said the premise of everything you've set out here is wrong, because everybody who lives in long-term care is disabled. You've missed out. I don't see the word disabled here at all. And they actually wrote back to me individually. So to me, it was faith that when you do take the time to make a written submission, they are read, and that if there's things that they hadn't considered, it may be that they'll reach out to you. So, Rabia, I think it's really important for um, everybody to take part in that.
Yes, for sure. People have to have their voice heard because you know what? Somebody once said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. If you're not writing yourself, other people are writing about
Yeah,
you and their opinions. We
yeah.
don't want opinions of people who do not understand disability poverty, who do not have lived experience, overshadowing the conversation in this case in terms of these written submissions. So
Yeah,
really, really important.
and do not understand disability. It
Yeah.
concerns me when I see platforms in elections that for disability only talk about making access to work
Yes.
happen, as if the way out of disability poverty is somehow everybody's going to get a job, and we just know that that's not the case, and that disabled people who cannot work um, deserve as much dignity, autonomy, independence as everybody else in this land. And as a rich country, no matter what else is going on in the world, we can afford that to happen. So it's really important that that we make sure that people aren't invisible in this process. So that's something that, again, we can hope to have input perhaps in those round tables as to what the survey will say and so on, but that's not something that we have any knowledge at the moment. So the second formal phase begins at the very latest on June the 23rd next year, but we hope before then. And that is the publishing of the proposed regulations in Part 1 of the Canada Gazette. Now, the Canada Gazette has been described to me as the government's newspaper. It's where it puts all its announcements. And it has this really formal process where it puts things out there, and then it invites responses, and then it publishes, okay, we listen to your responses, and then this is the final part of it. And that is then published in Part 2 of the Canada Gazette, at which time they become official. So again, there's another really crucial part, hey, Rabia, between those 2 points, Part 1 and Part 2 in the Canada Gazette. And, we will do everything we can at Disability Without Poverty to make sure that we get the information out to you that, hey, we're in this phase, if and that this is the link or whatever it may be, and so that people don't miss those things that happen. But that, Rabia, that's very formal, hey?
It is very formal, and not everybody can participate in that kind of formal process. Our biggest concern that the people who perhaps are in the deepest poverty, who face the greatest barriers to accessing employment programs, supports, are the ones not reached through this formal process.
And I think one of the biggest concerns with me is the digital divide that we have in this country, right? Because we have a digital divide when it comes to accessibility, right? But we also have a digital divide when it comes to when I meant disability accessibility, but we also have a divide when it comes to comfort to using technology. And it's often like, well, our libraries are open spaces where people can go in. Well, if you've never felt that a library is a welcoming place to you, not because of librarians, do not get me wrong, as a former school principal, that's not something I would ever say, but just because your own personal level of literacy is of such, or that, walking through the doors of a library to then ask somebody, hey, can you help me to access a computer? That's not easy, right? And those people, they're not on top of that you may need a screen reader, you may need ASL videos, you need headphones because you don't want everybody else in the library listening to what's going on. So, surveys take more than shoving them up on a website.
I mean, I can give you an example, Michelle, something I did not think about until I actually interacted with somebody. Years ago, I decided to run a campaign locally for city council, and I went door knocking, and I went into a building where there was a person with a disability in their home, and they said, I'm housebound. I cannot go to a polling station to vote. Before, there used to be a returning officer that would come to me and would give me the ballot and would assist me in casting my vote. That doesn't happen anymore. And I was like, wow, this person has the right to vote. We need to figure this out. So if as a person with a disability, I can get to a polling station. My accessibility need is, okay, help me mark the box or put it in an alternate format, but I can get to it. This individual, due to the nature of the disability, could not leave home. And, a parent who had children with disabilities said, I don't have transportation. So you learn incredible things when you talk to people directly. And there are all kinds of barriers that even those of us that position ourselves as experts can't always imagine.
I've seen a meme circulating on Facebook a lot through obviously the friends I have on there do a lot in the disability space. And it's that circle that says, inaccessibility means that people don't take part, means that they're invisible, which means that society says, well, they don't really need anything because we don't see them, which
Mm-hmm.
again means there's more inaccessibility because nobody stopped to do it. And I think this is so huge here that the voices of the people that need to be in, included the most are still very hard to reach. And what's that Ronald Reagan thing, the government here to help you? Yeah, we need the government to do this, right? They have the biggest resources in the country, and we need them to be the people that reach out. I'm keeping an eye on the time, Rabia. It's
Yep.
9:30 and we have got a lot of questions coming in, so I just want to touch on two things. First one being um, that a new minister, and I'll let you talk to that. And then the second one being why we have this campaign to budget the benefit. So, new minister.
Okay. Awesome. I will start off and then you will flow into your co-creation piece.
Okay.
So just stay tuned, folks. Hang in there. We have some, we're highlighting some of the issues, but we also have something exciting to talk to you about that Michelle will cover off. So we have a new minister. The new minister is enthusiastic, is committed. She's a racialized woman. She's worked in the healthcare sector. She's comfortable interacting with people with medical needs and with disabilities. She wants to do the right thing. She is a junior minister around cabinet. She needs to hear from all of us how important this benefit is, how important it is to hear from the people who live it day to day, and how important it is to get this money to the people who need it most as quickly as possible. And it needs to be a permanent solution. It needs to end the path toward disability poverty. It's a giant step of systems change that needs to be done right and needs to be done swiftly. We can't miss this opportunity. I can't stress that enough, that we just cannot miss this opportunity of, ensuring that we do the best we can. We're not expecting perfect, but we want to start boldly on the right path to do the right thing as quickly as possible, and then work to continue improving it so it can be right for everybody in disability poverty who needs the support from this top-up benefit. And there's a lot more work we know that goes into ending disability poverty. But the Canada Disability Benefit is what we have on the table. It's what we need to maximize. We've come a long way. This is historic systems change for people with disabilities. And we need to make it happen, and we need to make it happen right. So let's help the minister fast track the regulations by telling her the urgency of the need, by telling her the importance of lived experience, and by impressing upon her how many of us actually care about making this happen. In that path of orienting a new minister, we've been continuing with our Budget the Benefit campaign that we launched in spring. It's a national postcard campaign. We now have over 40,000 postcards circulating. Thank you to our community partner, Community Food Centres of Canada, who have over 400 affiliate organizations on the ground that have received and distributed postcards and collected them. These postcards are calling on Minister Chrystia Freeland to budget an adequate benefit. They go free in the mail to Ottawa through Stale Mail, Canada Post, free to Parliament Hill. We have ourselves produced well over 10,000 of these postcards. So we have close to, I would say, 55 to 60,000 postcards now between us and the food bank affiliates, the food center affiliates out there circulating that people are signing with and without disabilities and mailing off to the Minister of Finance to budget the benefit. We don't need the regulations done for her to put a dollar figure to this benefit. We cannot wait for this benefit. It needs to be budgeted like yesterday. We want it budgeted as soon as possible and no later than the next budget. Michelle.
And just to be clear as well, if you haven't, one of our snazzy yellow postcards hasn't come your way, there is also a digital version that is on our website. That if you are somebody that can use a website, that you can do, and it will go there by email as well. And I think,
Absolutely. And Michelle, if I can just add, if you have, access to distributing postcards to a few hundred people, you're in a specific part of Canada and you'd like to do that, reach out to us and we will find a way with you to make it possible for you to have hard copy postcards, because that's one way of us reaching people who cannot be reached through technology.
absolutely. If you are in a coffee group of some sort, you're in a group of people that do, I don't, any form of religious gatherings or those sorts of things.
Mhm.
If you are in a group of people of any type where you think that would like to take part in this campaign and distribute, send us an email, hello@disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca, and we can help you. Um, I think I think sometimes we budget the benefit. Sometimes we get caught up on what that might mean. I just want to tell everybody that when the announcement for dental came, the new dental care plan and all the rest of it, that wasn't actually in a formal budget. They just said, hey, here's the money for that. So they could tell us the budget for this benefit literally tomorrow. They could say, here's the money. This is what we're putting towards it. And, I don't think any of us want to hear that the money is tight anymore, because I'm sure most of us, given an access to the budget, could decide what bits that we would shuffle around to make sure that disabled people no longer lived in poverty. I just want to give a shout out to anybody on this call who is in New Brunswick, who exists on $786 a month. That's the extent that we're talking about here. And I know, we talk amongst friends here, and I know that most of us understand what these limits are. But, the and I know there are people that get access to no benefits whatsoever as well. But the lowest level of legislated poverty in this country is $786, and the poverty line, no lollipops and rainbows to make sure I get it in on every webinar, that poverty line sits in Fredericton at just on $2,000 a month. It's beyond appalling, right? So Rabia, I just want to, we've got some questions that have been summarized for me, because we are up to like 56 questions coming in here. So I'm going to just deal with one off the top. How much will the benefit likely be? So we don't know, right? That's what this whole process is dealing for. And the words in are to reduce poverty, to lift disabled people out of poverty, and those types of things. And so, to our mind, the regular poverty line is the starting line. So you just heard me say $2,000 in Fredericton. Where I live, it's $2,300. But that's what I would call the starting line. But I'm not the government, and I don't have control of that benefit. So that, I just want to say, to everybody who joined the call, hoping that they would hear something about how much it's going to be. We're at the start of that process. Another question, Rabia, perhaps do you want to talk about this one? How will all the benefits be protected and clawbacks be prevented?
that's where our provincial strategies are absolutely critical. We know that the government has been and will continue to have bilateral or multilateral conversations between the federal government and the provinces and territories. They will continue having conversations to hammer this out, to negotiate no clawbacks. We are, again, taking the bull by the horn or whatever the term is and doing things ourselves on the ground. So we have we are mobilizing province by province. So we have been working in British Columbia. Shout out to Amanda Lockage for that, and her team. She has Kate and Mike working with her there. We had Andrea Van Voot doing our campaign in Alberta, in Calgary, and again we will be. We're looking for someone. So anybody out there from Alberta who has very strong grassroots organizing skills and public speaking skills and government relations, check out our job posting out there. Reach out to us and send us your credentials. We are, under the advice of Andrea and others, continuing to mobilize in Alberta thanks to the Calgary Foundation, and in Vancouver thanks to the Vancouver Foundation. In Ontario, we are also working with existing groups that are doing work to ensure no clawbacks. And we're continuing that conversation of no clawbacks at a provincial level in every province, including in Quebec. So we're doing our part. We're encouraging people with disabilities on the ground to work with us. We are working collaboratively with people who are already advocating provincially for improvements to provincial supports and programs. And, we know that the government is going to be negotiating that as well. But you know what? We can't leave it to them. That's one thing we've learned in this journey of disability without poverty, is we cannot leave it to government alone to do it all and do it all right the way we need it. We need to own it and do the work ourselves.
So I think it's also really important to talk about what a clawback actually is, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
I think we would see us at Disability Without Poverty and all our friends and allies in other disability organizations and everybody who's listening to this webinar, we're going to move into a kind of watchdog role after this to be able to communicate what we think is a clawback. And quite simply, nobody should be left worse off when this comes in as where they are today. So, for example, if you have access to a transit pass of some sort in the province that you're in, that is something that's given to you right now, taking that away is a clawback, right? It's not, clawback isn't just, we're going to take $50 off a benefit or that sort of thing. No, a clawback is things
Much more.
that come under goods and services. And I'm going to use the example I've used before because it's one of those things that people don't like to talk about, because the way our bodies functions as disabled people often aren't in ways that are, friendly, that anybody wants to talk about. We have to talk about our toileting needs. And I read a story in the news last year about a young woman in Alberta who need to use a certain type of incontinence pad. The Albertan government stopped funding that one. That was a slimline. It meant that she was in her 20s. I tell you, by the time I finish telling this story, she's going to be retired. But anyway, she was, in her 20s, likes to go out with her friends, likes to wear fashionable clothing. They replaced it with basically a bulky adult diaper. That is a clawback, right? That is taking something and changing it because you're going to save $1 a product or something that somebody in an office thought that it was a good idea. But the change, the clawback, the impact on that disabled individual was more than that $1 a unit could ever manage. So, I think the answer to the question is, how will they be protected? Well, we would hope that, the official work, if you like, that we're doing with each province to talk to them about why they shouldn't and what it is, And I know Minister Qualtrough, when she spoke on the benefit, we haven't heard the new minister, Kamal Khera, speak publicly on it in this way, but she was like, this is a hard line in the sand. There will be no clawbacks, right? I'm not sure what mechanisms the government has to enforce that. What we do is we keep very much aware of what's going on, and we report back to each other. We report to the provincial governments that this simply isn't acceptable.
And Michelle,
Go.
sorry, that's like us also talking about how, provincial governments increase provincial income supports for people with disabilities. And then, for example, their agencies that support them, their group homes, jack up their room and board rates. So the person with a disability really ends up with nothing in their hand. Their costs suddenly increase. So those are also things that we need to advocate on province by province.
Yeah, Rabia, that's another very
Yeah.
hot button topic for me, that, in BC, 80% of the money is taken so to pay for board and lodging. So if that comes in for people who are living in institutions in BC and they only end up with 20% of this, then they're not getting any further ahead. I'm keeping my eye on the questions. I'm going to take care of another one of them. It says, what's the qualifying criteria going to be? Again, we don't know, but we've had signs and signals. The federal government says it needs a list, right? It needs to know who it's going to give this benefit to. And the list that it currently has as anybody that receives a federal benefit. So those are
The
DTC,
disability tax credit.
disability tax credit,
Yeah.
CPPD or QPPD, the
Yeah.
Canada
And the
Pension Plan
veterans
Disability,
benefit.
and the Veterans Benefit.
Yeah.
So the disability tax credit is the most controversial of those, because that there is an absolutely sort of a misnomer, an oxymoron, just the wrong thing to be using a tax credit to get money to the people who have the least money in our country and probably don't pay taxes anyway, so therefore have no need for disability tax credit.
And don't file
So,
their income tax because,
no,
they just can't do it for multiple reasons, and they don't see the
yeah,
point to it sometimes. They're not informed about the benefits of
no,
filing their taxes and getting this disability tax credit.
I need to be able to go somewhere to do it and all of those sorts
Yeah.
of things. So that's what we're hearing. So if you are somebody who is of low income that would be potentially receiving this new Canada Disability Benefit supplement, and you don't currently have disability tax credit, look for places in your province that could help you apply for it. I'll give a shout out to Disability Alliance BC, because I know that they're one of the organizations, being someone here in BC, I'm sure there's places across the country that could help you do that. But it's not easy. And we are working on ways to put pressure on to make that list more open. So, for example, our ideal would be anybody that currently gets a provincial territorial disability assistance payment also becomes automatically eligible. So that's something that, again, if you want to talk to a politician, you want to put some pressure on, that's something that we would strongly encourage you to do. So, have mandate letters, here's a technical one, have mandate letters been delivered and released yet? Will the new minister be the one in charge of the CDB, or will it be ESDC? So just to explain that one, and then I'll get Rabia to answer. So mandate letters are the letters that the Prime Minister sends to his minister to tell them what they're in charge of and what they've got to do. ESDC is employment, social development, and something or other.
Employment
Rabbi.
Social Development Canada, yes.
Canada, there you go. I'm terrible. I always get the letters in the wrong order, so there's no way I can remember what it stands for. that is the larger bureaucratic section that disability stuff fits into. So I, at that meeting I went to in August, I heard it said that the minister for equity,
For
equity, inclusion,
diversity,
and
inclusion, and persons with disabilities.
oh, I always want to say equity diversion because it seems to be. But anyway, as you can tell, we've been going a while here, and I'm starting to get tired. So I heard it said by bureaucrats from ESDC that Minister Kamal Khedr is going to be the person charged
Yes.
with getting this over the line, but haven't seen a mandate letter yet. Rabia, your understanding on any
Yeah,
of that?
mandate letters should be coming soon when everybody goes back to Ottawa. I guess we'll see something. Michelle, I'm just time conscious. The clock is
Yes,
ticking away on our webinar, and
9:51.
we have some important stuff to talk about than mandate letters.
Yeah, okay. You want me to move on to,
Yes, I do.
because one of the questions here is how will they reach more vulnerable populations, such as those
So
experiencing houselessness, to see what their vulnerabilities are? So
we don't think they can.
my answer to that is I don't know what they're going to do, but I
Yeah.
know what we're going to do. So we're going to take this moment to announce that, at DWP, we've had a phrase from the day one that this is too big for the government to do alone. And we don't believe that the government can get in touch with people. We are at the very early stages, and please don't expect this to happen like today or tomorrow, but within the next month we will have a new website section built, out of which we are going to be looking for the views of 5,000 disabled Canadians on all of the things that we've talked about today. And I'm just reaching out to everybody that is in the technical part in the background to make sure that all of these questions are captured, because they are great for us to be able to build into the work that we're going to do. For me as the researcher, I start to get all excited and all nerdy about this, because once we have got the views in these 5,000, we're going to have 100 people that are going to reach out to 3 or 4 people each. And we're going to be targeting people, asking people to come forward who can reach people that are in those, live in those margins of the marginalities, those people that, for example, I said my research is younger disabled adults who live in long-term care. That's my part of this. That's what I commit I'm going to do. I am going to, and they will be, conversation-based interviews where we talk to people in those situations. After all of that, we're going to write a report that we're going to give to government. And Rabia and I are actively reaching out to government. If you're listening to us now, we're actually absolutely reaching out to say, please work with us on this. Tell us what you'd like us to ask, perhaps. And we will come up with a report where we will tell you what was heard, what was said, what people's concerns are, what really needs to happen from the people who need this the most. So, and then after we've done these, the interim report, we're going to take everything we've heard back to those first 5,000 people and say, hey, this is what we came up with. What do you think? Because often, how many times do you take part in a survey and it feels like your information, you gave it out, but nothing came back. Nobody asked you if what the final solution was. So we're going to complete the circle. We can't guarantee that the government will do what we say, but we can guarantee that we will be knocking on those doors hard to say, we didn't think you could reach those people, so we set out to do it. And it's hard work, and we're going to try our damnedest to do that hard work. So
And
Rabia,
just
there's
to
my excited bit. You go on for a bit.
thank you so much, Michelle. Just to let everybody know, Disability Without Poverty is nonprofit. We partner with charities and philanthropy to get the work done. We take no money from government. We are
That's really,
external, but we
yeah,
work,
that's,
we
yeah.
work in the spirit of doing the right thing, in a nonpartisan spirit, to work with everybody involved, with respect and dignity and all that good stuff, challenging the bar to ensure that the voices of disabled people at the grassroots level, who are often not engaged, are given opportunity to be heard, and that we are creating a process, in this case, where we are going to reach people who often don't give input to those formal processes that we already talked about. Michelle's committed to finding those hard to reach young people in long-term care. I'm committed to finding people with disabilities who are newcomers, who face language barriers, who are racialized, who are Black. We have folks in Indigenous communities that will reach out in Nunavut, for example, to the deaf community. We have a part of our advisory leadership group, Andrea Zachary, who will reach out to Black deaf people as a Black deaf woman. So we are tapping into people and have this network that we're mobilizing to ensure that people whose voices are not considered in policy making have direct impact through our report to government.
And and we will reach out to those people in the way that they need reaching out
Yeah.
to. So if you're somebody that requires, ASL, the person that reaches out to you will be somebody that uses ASL LSQ. If you're nonverbal, if whatever it is, because it's a conversation with a peer, it's a conversation with someone with a similar lived experience. So I see, Rabia, the slides are going up for the end of the conversation, and I'll
Yeah, so
stop getting
end of conversation, what I would want to say is make sure your voice is heard, reach out to other people that you know who live with disabilities, tell them to connect with us, follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, visit our website. We're happy to help you reach out and communicate with your elected officials provincially and federally. You want any tips and tricks around that, visit our website for our toolkit around that. You want to participate in our postcard campaign, please do. Let's hit the minister hard with budget the benefit. We need that dollar figure that will help us determine many things in this journey of getting the money to the people who need it most. So get involved, get involved, get involved. This is your democracy, and it is your democratic duty to be fully involved to the best of your abilities.
So I think, Rabia, you covered everything on the final slides. There's nothing more to say than to just highlight our website, disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca, email address, hello@disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca. If you're on Facebook, you can come find us there. If you're on the thing formerly known as Twitter, you can find us there as well. Thank you so much for so many people. We're still at like 237 people that have stayed with us for the length of this conversation. It really shows the concerns that people have and the concerns that we have. And while we may not be able to answer your questions because they're probably the same questions that we have at the moment: how much, who gets it, when's it going to happen? But that hearing you ask the questions means that we continue to ask the questions in every opportunity that we get as well. So thank you,
We are
everybody.
living, eating, breathing DWP and the Canada Disability Benefit in our world. We go to events and we hand out postcards and talk about DWP, even if it's amongst friends. And we need every person who cares about disability poverty to do the same. So thank you, merci, Megwitch. Until next time, stay tuned to what we're doing.